You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who, and today we're discussing the 12th Doctor story, In the Forest of the Night. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Father Corey totally welched on us. He is not here today. He knew one of the most painful episodes was coming up, and he is not here.
Yes, I'm sure that's it. It's not that his boss called.
No, not that his boss called at all.
It's very convenient.
Yeah. Hope you're having a good time, Father Corey.
Yes. I want to remind everyone to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Secrets of Doctor Who. Retweet us on Twitter where we're at SQPN, and of course, leave comments wherever you find us. I want to tell you about another show on the network you are sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Star Wars. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Star Wars. And stick around to the end of the episode because we have some more of your great listener feedback to share with you. But first, we're going to be talking about In the Forest of the Night, or as I like to call it, In the Forest of the Night at the Museum. A little play off the movie. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens?
Well, after the really complex summaries I've had to do lately, it's nice to have some simpler ones. So, this week, London and the entire world has been overgrown by a forest. There are annoying kids. The end.
Some stuff happens in the middle.
Yeah, I can go a little deeper.
Okay.
The entire planet has been, it's still simple though. Entire planet has been covered in a forest that grew up overnight while Clara and Danny were hosting a sleepover for a bunch of kids at a museum. After making contact with the doctor, they assume the trees are a prelude to an alien invasion. There's lots of running through the forest instead of corridors and being menaced by wild zoo animals. And there's also a magic child who is telepathic, and a giant solar flare coming to destroy the Earth. Clara tells the doctor to leave and save himself since he can't stop the solar flare and save the planet. He leaves, but then realizes the trees appeared in order to absorb the solar flare. They do, and then they magically vanish. The end.
It's longer, but no less.
It's just running
indicative.
Around through the forest and being menaced by zoo animals. There's nothing significant in the plot.
Right. You know, as I was thinking about this one, it's like Moon Egg, whatever it's actually called, but I just call it Moon. Kill the Moon. It's completely implausible premise. It's a fairy tale story, and that seems to be prevalent in this season. Like this season, there's these two, and I think there's at least another one in this season.
And it's not just this season; it's a Stephen Moffat thing. Like the Wedding of River Song is also science fairy tale. And I can go along with science fairy tale to a certain extent, but I have in my notes science fairy tale done wrong. This is not a satisfying episode. It is, it's boring, and it's filled up with a lot of other stuff. Like this is Danny Pink's final full outing because he gets killed next episode.
Right.
And there's a good bit of drama in this one. Part of the running around is that Clara has not been honest with Danny about the fact that she is still seeing the doctor. And because she told Danny episodes ago she was going to break it off with the doctor, and she hasn't. And she's been hiding it from Danny, and now they run into the doctor in the middle of a crisis, and it becomes obvious that she's still been working with him. And so we have drama with Danny learning that Clara has not been honest with him. And at the end of the episode, he tells her he just wants to know the truth. He's not going to judge her or anything. He just wants to know what's true. And she starts to tell him, and he shuts her off and says, no, go home, think about it, and then tell me. I think you owe me that. And she agrees she does. And it's like, okay, actually, no, this is not an owed thing. And the entire purpose of that is to push off the phone call so that he can die in the middle of it next episode while she's trying to tell him the truth.
Yeah, when we talk about that, I have words.
Yeah,
because I don't understand what. Yeah, anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, in this one, it's all about like repairing the relationship and really building up Danny so that next episode's loss is supposed to be felt by the audience even more. And so yeah, we have this, kids at the museum on an overnight, which is a thing. I've done it with scouts, so there's the sleepover at the museum.
Never did that. I mean, we had a museum in my town, but we never did that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I slept over on a battleship once. That was kind of interesting. The battleship Massachusetts, which is a World War II ship. Oh. And I slept over on that with my nephew.
Too bad it wasn't the USS Hornet. They have a whole community of ghosts there. It's a fascinating ghost ecosystem.
Oh, there's another one that's even closer to me. The USS Salem has ghosts on it, and they do ghost tours, including detectors and things like that. So that's a whole nother thing. But you and I can talk about that later, because I may go do that for Mysterious World. But in any case, so yeah, they're sleeping over, and the kids that they claim are gifted kids, and then Clara later on says
these kids clearly are not gifted, and they point that out. This is a group of misfits. This is some kind of group of troubled kids that Clara has been lying to and referring to them as gifted and talented, when really they're on the other end of the spectrum.
Right. Well, and it shows an interesting pattern in Clara to lie to people to tell them what she thinks they want to hear. It's a bit of a character flaw in Clara there, as I've been noticing that they've been bringing out. So we start with this little girl wandering around in this forest with the TARDIS, knocking on the TARDIS door, and the Doctor invites her in. And I do like this, where she's not at all surprised at the TARDIS being bigger on the inside. Kids are good at accepting implausibilities that defy their expectations.
She also says she was told that it was bigger on the inside.
Yeah, we have
the inference is she was told by Clara, because she thought it was Clara, but it was actually these voices of these little sprites that are almost entirely unconnected to the plot.
Yeah, I mean, are they the voices of the trees? That's kind of what I was thinking.
Except they're not trees. They identify themselves as some kind of little nature thing that has existed longer than mankind and that will exist long after mankind. And she perceives them in some way, but they're not exactly the trees, but they're sort of responsible for the trees. The only way they manifest in the plot is when Maeve is running through the forest, she's swatting her hands in front of her face as she's running, all the time. Yeah. And I took note of this before they explained it, but apparently, so this child is telepathic. She's perceiving things that other people don't, and that's fine. Then the Doctor modifies the sonic somehow to make what she's swatting at manifest. And it's little sparkles of light that are flying around her, and they're these little nature sprites. But they're only in this one scene. They speak through her and explain what they are, but they don't explain clearly their connection with the trees. So the net effect is they're one more thing that has been added to this episode to pad the runtime. And you could remove them from the story and it would play out exactly the same way.
Were the trees themselves sentient, or were these sprites making the trees grow?
They don't make it clear.
Yeah, it's very confusing. You know what this kind of reminds me of is that line, "The Witch in the Wardrobe" Christmas special with the 11th Doctor that they did. Yeah, I mean, where there was a forest.
Unnecessary one.
Yeah, exactly. Where you have this, the forest that's alive and sentient and manifests itself through the children. I mean, in a way, they've kind of recycled that plot, which is appropriate for wood.
And it would be fine if they pointed that out. They could hang a lantern on that and have the Doctor say, "In my last incarnation, I encountered a bunch of sentient trees at Christmas once." Yeah.
And they don't. It is. So yeah, it is an odd story. So we have.
Also, speaking of things that are completely irrelevant to the plot, the Doctor,
right,
and Clara and the kids. This movie suffers, or this episode suffers from the same problem as the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes.
Indiana Jones is, or the movie All the President's Men. Nixon still would have gotten out of office if Woodward and Bernstein had never existed. They make it seem like Woodward and Bernstein are doing something important in that movie, and they're completely not, because it was not the Washington Post that brought down Nixon. It was the congressional investigations. And so you could remove Woodward and Bernstein from that story, and it would have played out the same way. Same thing with Indiana Jones or Raiders of the Lost Ark. He doesn't do anything in the story ultimately. He's just our viewpoint character.
Yeah.
But if you pull him out of the movie, the Nazis still would have gotten the Ark. They still would have taken it to the island. Their faces still would have melted. It would have played out exactly the same way.
Right. The only difference is it doesn't end up in a warehouse.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It would be
that's
on an
right.
island.
Yeah.
But it would, either way, it's hidden away from public view in the end.
Yes.
And so the difference is that All the President's Men and Raiders of the Lost Ark are good movies that can pull off the main characters being irrelevant to the action.
Yes.
Whereas this does not have that benefit. And the Doctor and Clara are just irrelevant. The same thing would have happened. The trees appeared overnight. The Doctor didn't have anything to do with that. He doesn't affect the trees in any way. And then they still would have absorbed the solar flare and magically vanished. And if the Doctor and Clara had not been in the story, the exact same set of events would have played out for Earth.
Right. It's very... It feels like it's all a premise just to get the Doctor and Clara and Danny in several conversations. It's like that. Really, it all exists. All of the sci-fi fantasy or science fantasy elements are just there to create these conversations that they have in order to build up for what's coming next week.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, somebody had to pitch this idea.
Yeah.
My guess is that the pitch wasn't let's build up for next week, but let's have the Doctor in a forest that magically appears and
right.
And yeah.
So there are a few things that I thought were kind of fun or interesting, like the fact when the Doctor tries to take off with the TARDIS to go to London, because at first he doesn't think he's in London, he thinks he's landed somewhere else. To go there, it keeps saying you've reached your destination, like a GPS. I thought that was kind of funny that it was doing that. There's some quibbles, like why is there no one else in the museum apart from one guard? In fact, where are all the people? Like in this city, we see a couple of parents, and then some workers who are about trying to burn the forest, but that's it. Like,
well, we are in a public space, and so people would have been at home, during the night when the forest grew up. And then in the morning they came out and there's a forest here. So that's going to impede their movements. And we have that montage of TV sequences, with stations all over the world announcing this forest has grown and please remain at home and be calm. So I think that's meant to be the explanation for why we don't see more people.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I just feel like Trafalgar Square is a major place in the city. And I can imagine, London is a major cosmopolitan city that stuff goes on all night. I don't know. It felt like it was a little bit contrived, this whole we didn't want to have all these extras. We pay for all these extras. So let's, pretend they're all at home. What about this whole thing about them trying to burn the trees, but there's too much oxygen? Is that plausible?
No.
That's what I thought. Isn't oxygen a key component of flame? That's,
yeah. So we should probably explain that the government decides to, because the trees have grown up in the middle of streets and stuff, it's impeding people's ability to move around the city. And so they decide to burn select corridors in the forest to allow people to be able to move around again. And the trees somehow resist that.
Yeah.
And it's tied up with the way they're gonna, and we see a defoliation crew trying to burn the trees and it failing. And that's another one of our sort of scare moments. We're meant to initially be frightened of all the guys in the shiny aluminum foil hazmat suits and with the flamethrowers, and then it turns out they're not scary. They're just a foil for, oh, you foolish humans,
Right.
trying to burn down the forest. But it's set up for how the trees. It's showing us the trees can absorb fire,
Right.
or neutralize fire, and that's a setup for what they're going to do with the solar flare. Except solar flares and earthly fire are two different things, and yeah.
Well, I mean, just like the piling implausibilities on implausibilities, the whole like the trees grow up and therefore all of those roads are now destroyed and ruined because these roots have grown, the trunks have grown up through them. No, trees magically repair themselves.
And where were the seeds under the roads? I mean, those trees had to come from something.
Right. It's just it's baffling how again, it's a fantasy, it's a fairy tale, and we don't expect scientific plausibility from fairy tales, but it's this isn't a show about magic. It's a show about an alien in a time traveling box.
It should be a show about magic more. They shouldn't always Scooby Doo it, and occasionally they don't. Like in The Demons. That white witch in the village, she's a magic user. And so they should give themselves permission to use magic more than they do. It would help with the explanation some of the time, rather than trying to make something that sounds scientific as an explanation for what's clearly a magical effect.
Right. That's the thing is that they're proposing it as, this is plausible, but it's not under the laws of science. So, yeah.
I do like, though, that they did think through one aspect of this, which is if these trees grew in one night, they're not going to have rings. Because rings are caused by the climatic variations over the course of a year. And these trees aren't going to have that. They're not going to have climatic variations in one night. So once you take off the bark, it's just going to be one solid thing without all the rings.
Right. And although you don't read rings in the age of a tree in the rings of a branch, that's an actually important point. Like you can't tell how old a tree is because that branch has not existed for the entire life of the tree.
Right. So you got to go for the trunk.
Yeah. Yeah. But that is a good point. Like it was just like it was solid, which would be weird to look at, like a solid non-ringed tree branch or trunk. With Danny and Clara, they kind of bring up their personalities a little bit, where Danny in the midst of this is focused on watching after the kids, while Clara is focused on the excitement of the weirdness. Although Danny's defaults to his military training and he treats them like soldiers and he keeps calling them team. And the kids are like, why do you keep calling us team?
Yeah, I thought the kids' reaction was annoying. They even have, because they're trying to work this smart aleck kid, theme. And so the kids object to whatever the adults do, or frequently object. And like at one point, Danny says, okay, team, let's go do whatever it is. And one of the kids says, we will, only if you stop calling us team. And it's like, how plausible is that? If I was a kid, I mean, I remember being a kid. If my coach or whatever teacher referred to the class as team, I'm not going to object to that.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's like a problem like a lot of TV has with kids is they portray them as smaller, snarky adults. Like just the things they say are not plausible kid things. They're just whatever, like adult wish fulfillment in a sense. Like when I was a kid, I wish I was this snarky. It was like that with the girl in the when the couple episodes ago when the doctor was the custodian. I can never remember any of the characters' names, but that girl there, she was so very
Courtney.
Yes, Courtney, and she was snarky and talked back, and
the two kids that Clara babysat for.
Right. It's like all kids in Moffat's Doctor Who are like snarky and presumptuous and precocious, and it's not
and not prepossessing.
Right. I mean, at least find some kids who are different. That's the other thing is Sure, I know kids in my kids' scout troop who are kind of like that. They say things like that, but then there are other kinds of kids. So depict them. It is kind of weird. Have you ever seen the M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Happening?
Mm-mm,
so
that one. I've seen other M. Night Shyamalan movies that, to some extent, happened.
This may be his worst movie, and it was about the Earth coming alive and basically killing people because we were killing them. The trees were causing people to go insane, and then they would do things that were self-destructive in various ways. And so people trying to survive this. And I'm like, this is kind of like a little less annoying and deadly, The Happening, which is not saying much, but it's this idea that it kind of feeds into this whole like humans are a plague on the planet sort of thing. Gaia wants to take care of us and we keep messing with her. And if only we would let Gaia, nurture us, we'd be much better off. It just kind of, I don't know. It's condescending.
You can do nature disaster movies creepy nature disaster movies without that humans are a plague business, which is so tired. And I've seen it so much. And who cares about that? And it's not true, and it's scientifically implausible.
Right.
But you can do creepy nature disaster movies like Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds.
Yeah.
Okay. The birds just freak out and start menacing humans for some reason, but it's not our fault. They're just doing it.
Right.
It's creepy.
Right. Which makes it creepier because it's like there's no explanation. Yeah, exactly. We have the kids' parents who are kind of freaking out and we get clueless
single parents, it seems.
Yes, there's always single parents in Moffat's time, isn't it? And they're pretty clueless because they're thinking that the trees are the result of government decisions or something. Well, I wish they'd consulted us, that's like before they planted all these trees. I mean, it just makes the adults look stupid, which is kind of, I don't know. You see that a lot. So you have the snarky kids who are, a little precocious. And you have their clueless parents. I don't know. There's something off about it.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have this whole thing about the doctor figuring out the flares, and he says, "Oh, Tunguska and this other event were previous versions of this."
Tunguska is a place in Siberia. It's in the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, and at the time in 1908, the Russian Empire. And something came into Earth's atmosphere and exploded. And to this day, there's discussion about what exactly was it. Leading contenders are a part of an asteroid or part of a comet. Although there are more exotic theories, like a micro black hole, or which might have even passed into the Earth, or an alien spaceship, or things like that. But there was this huge airburst atmospheric explosion that flattened a bunch of trees and left no crater in the ground. That's why it was an atmospheric explosion, not a terrestrial impact. And nobody is really sure what caused it. Here, the doctor says it's essentially the same thing, and that the trees in Siberia grew to deal with the problem. Except, no, they didn't grow overnight to deal with the problem. They just have trees in Siberia.
Yes.
And he also names another event that apparently is fictional, that didn't really happen as far as I've been able to determine, but at least based on a quick look, it didn't seem to have happened. And so they may have just made that up so he could cite two precedents instead of one.
Right. Makes it more believable, I guess, when you cite two. So we also have, what was I going to say?
Also, like Kill the Moon, we have another everyone in the audience needs to clap their hands for Tinkerbell moment.
Oh, yeah.
Where instead of voting on do we kill the moon or not by turning on or off our nights, so that really only North America and part of Europe gets to vote, they use the TARDIS to call every phone on Earth and tell people not to harm the trees. because the trees are going to deal with the solar flare.
Yeah. Again, just like, oh, well, just if a little girl asks them in English, everyone will listen to her. Yeah.
I know. I thought about the language. I assume the TARDIS is translating. Its translation circuit is engaged for those phone calls.
Yeah.
But
yeah. There is one point where the Doctor kind of makes this reference to why do we find forests creepy? Why do we, as humans, find it creepy?
I had this in my notes. The Doctor says the forest is mankind's nightmare. And it's like, dude, do you know any terrestrial evolutionary biology? The forest is where our ancestors grew up. We love the forest. We build parks because when even in our own ideal lawns, we want, I mean, this is the ideal. Not everyone affords this, but we want grass and trees and a pool of water. You know, whether it's a swimming pool or a fountain or something, we want those elements. We want trees, water, and grass.
Yeah.
That's our evolutionary heritage. That's what we as a species love. We are not Gila monsters that would prefer living in the desert with rocks and sand and desert scrub.
Right. What people are afraid of is what lives in the forest in the dark. We're afraid of wolves and tigers, which we get to see in this episode.
Yeah, and which is where the title comes from, because it's the poem Tiger, Tiger. And so it's got the famous opening lot by Blake, I want to say.
Yes.
But it's got the famous opening line, Tiger, Tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye framed thy fearful symmetry? And so we've got a tiger in this for one scene.
Mm-hmm.
It just, all it does is come on and get menace people for a few seconds before Danny Pink flashes a flashlight in its eyes and it leaves.
If only people could have flashlights to ward off all the tigers.
Yeah. Well, okay. So here's the thing. The episode is called In the Forest of the Night, after the tiger, and the entire episode takes place during the daytime.
Right.
So it's like, you could have come up with a better title, guys. This is the title you have focuses the attention on the tiger, which completely underwhelms in the episode as the basis of a title.
Right. Yeah, the tiger in this was CGI and stock footage, and neither of them worked very well. I mean, they were okay. You believe it at first, but you a little too much scrutiny, and you see right through it. But it wasn't believable, the interaction with the tiger. You know, again, Danny's standing there on the same side of the fence with all the kids with the tiger, and the tiger runs away. Okay, that doesn't make any sense, but okay. Yeah.
Incidentally, yes, I'm aware that In the Forest of the Night could also be a reference to the forest that grew overnight. But if you know your English literature, the title is going to point at the tiger.
Right. We have this subplot involving Maeve, the telepathic girl, who apparently her older sister had run away, and she's been traumatized by it. Yeah,
they say disappeared or vanished.
Right.
And so they don't know that she ran away. They're afraid it may have been something more deadly than that. Right.
And so she's been on medication to treat her anxiety, and I kind of dislike this whole thing, this part especially because the doctor sort of dismisses medication for mental health reasons, and sort of like, why are you like putting, like, I know he means this particular girl who's got this particular gift, but nobody knows that she has this gift. And so it comes across as this general disdain for, mental health care.
Yeah. So this moment in the episode reminded me of the series Fringe. If you've ever seen that, one of the characters is I'm blanking on the actor's name. John Noble. John Noble.
Yeah.
He plays a character named Walter Bishop, and he's a mad scientist who is older and cranky, and he will say things like this. But he'll encounter people on Fringe who say things that sound mentally ill. And unlike other people, he will take them seriously and say, yeah, if this woman told you she was out of your body and killed this other person, why aren't you believing her? She's confessing.
Right.
And so I related the doctors, don't give her pills right now because we need her to tune into this thing and the pills will shut it off, as essentially the same thing. But he does say it with annoying excessive bombast that is meant to show that he's out of touch with, in part, even though he's right in this case, it's meant to show he's out of touch with human realities, because that's who the 12th Doctor is. He's out of touch with human realities.
Yeah, I mean, there was an earlier point where he sort of disdains. Why do you always treat people like this with these things? And I get it. You're right. Like I think that's what it's meant to do. But I don't know. As someone who has kids who are get treated for issues like this, anxiety issues, it kind of struck home a little differently this time watching it than the last time I watched it. But he does say about Maeve, because of this subplot about her missing sister, why she's more attuned to what's going on around them than anyone else. He says she's lost someone, and people who've lost someone, they're always listening, always looking, always hoping. So they notice more, they hear more. So that's what he's saying is like, because she's lost, she's instinctively looking.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever, dude. I've lost someone and I didn't have magical visions afterwards.
Right. Yeah. There's it's somewhat poetic. Yeah, I guess is the one way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
another thing that's in this episode that's a little interesting is, the Doctor at one point says that the Earth, the planet, grows through a series of catastrophes.
Yes.
Like the Ice Age and now apparently the Tree Age.
Right.
And so this view is known as catastrophism. And it's actually an important view in the history of science, because there's a debate in the history of science about how do the things around us on Earth, things like the Grand Canyon or other things, form. Is it through a slow process of minor changes that build up over vast periods of time, which is a view known as uniformitarianism, that the same processes in nature happen uniformly over long periods of time? Or do they get created suddenly through massive catastrophes? And historically, there's been a debate between uniformitarians and catastrophists. These days, the generally received answer in science is it's a mix of the two. That during most of history, uniformitarianism applies, but periodically there are massive catastrophes, and both of them contribute to the formations we see around us geologically.
We talked about that in an episode of Mysterious World, or several on Young Earth.
On the Young Earth and the Great Flood.
Yes. Yep. So one thing that's interesting about this is the misdirection, which is, and Moffat has done this in other episodes, and Doctor Who does this a lot, where we think that everything is going one way. The trees are the enemy, and it turns out that the Doctor and Clara are wrong. The trees are not the enemy; they're the savior. They're the good guy. And so there's a sort of they kind of rely on this misdirection stuff a lot in Moffat's time. I guess it's a substitute for real plotting in this one. I thought that was interesting. There is this, in the end, they are convinced that the Earth is about to be destroyed, and the Doctor wants to take them, all the kids and Denny and Clara, into the TARDIS.
Well, actually, so there's a bit more of a setup than that, because the Doctor, Clara keeps poking the Doctor in the episode to do something that will solve the problem, right? And he says, "I can't," and he says that repeatedly. And they realize the solar flare is coming, and it's like, this is physics. I can't fight physics. And now, what he could do in Jodie Whittaker's era of Doctor Who is take the TARDIS into space and let it absorb the solar flare for you,
right?
But he says he can't, and so Clara then says, "Well, if you can't save the planet, then save what you can. Let's get Danny and me and the kids. Let's get us all back to the TARDIS, and at least we can survive." And this, the doctor agrees to do. And this actually draws on on Peter Capaldi's history with the show, because he was in that role in the fires of Pompeii, where the doctor and Donna realized the doctor could not stop Pompeii from happening. And Donna insisted that he was about to walk away. And Donna insisted that he save someone, just save somebody, save who you can. And he saved this guy and his family. The guy was played by Peter Capaldi. And then when they hired Peter Capaldi for Doctor Who, for the role of Doctor Who, they used that in his backstory and said that the reason he chose this face was to remind him to always do this, to always save what you can. And so this is a nice point in the writing. This is where the writing is the most interesting, which is why I mentioned this part of the show in my capsule review. So he agrees to save the people he can, and he takes them to the TARDIS, and then Clara changes her mind. And it's like, okay, now you get in the TARDIS and leave. And he's like, but I'm going to save these people. And she's like, no, they're going to want to live with their families. If they survive, they will never stop missing their parents. And I'm going like, so what?
They'll be alive.
Okay, they'll be alive. They may have a regret, but that's, I think they and their parents would choose for the children to survive.
Yes.
You're making this decision for them, and you shouldn't. But letting that pass, the doctor's like, well, then why won't you come? Because she's his traveling companion. And she's like, don't make me say it. And he does. And she finally says, because I don't want to be the last of my kind, which is what he is.
Right.
And so go and save yourself and leave. And he does. And this is where the writing is the most compelling, because it's playing on the doctor's identity here. Save who you can, the last of your kind, and then he actually makes the choice and leaves. And that's the most interesting the show ever gets in this episode.
Right.
And then once he's up in space, sitting around in the TARDIS watching video of the solar flare, it suddenly occurs to him that the magical trees are going to save everybody.
Yes.
And then he comes back.
And like we always do in Moffat, we undo the drama. We always come back from the final thing to something lesser. It doesn't undo that conversation and the impact of it, I think, because the Doctor will come back to this idea of his own identity in the next season. Is it the next season? In the next season, yeah.
Also, Clara lied to him to get him back to the TARDIS. It was never her plan to have him save the kid. She didn't just change her mind. She only appeared to.
Right.
And so rule 1, Clara lies.
The Doctor lies and Clara's becoming the Doctor.
Yeah.
And there is more implausibility. The solar flare, even if the trees absorb the solar flare, the coronal mass ejection, they would still wipe out all the electronics and satellites and all that sort of stuff too.
Super mega Carrington event. Yeah.
Yeah. But moving on.
And afterwards, the trees magically vanish. And like, where is all this mass going?
Right.
All
the energy that there was required to grow them too. Where'd that come from?
Yeah. Oh man. Even if we let you, Stephen Moffat, create these trees, they're going to be trees, dead trees, or possibly living trees all over the place after this is done.
Well, like, hey, we don't have to worry about chopping down trees anymore. There's trees everywhere. We can chop down all the trees. No more recycling paper.
Yeah. And furthermore, look at your own previous example, Tunguska. The trees didn't magically vanish there. They were falling all over the place. Right.
That's how we knew what had happened. Yeah. Again, more implausibilities. Danny rejects the chance to go see a space wonder, like to go see, the trees disappear.
So we can butter up Clara with, "You're as amazing as anything I could see in the universe." Right.
Yeah, nice line there, Danny. The Doctor says the human superpower is forgetting. Like, Clara's like, no one will ever forget this, which we kind of put a pin in this because obviously we can't have the world from this point on all being affected by the trees overnight. Like people will forget. If you remembered how things feel, the doctor says, you'd stop having wars and stop having babies, which I think is actually an interesting point. Like they actually say that women, the memory of how much childbirth hurts fades with time, and part of that is the oxytocin from nursing babies and that sort of thing. The memory of the pain fades, because if women could remember exactly how it felt to give birth, they would only ever do it once, and that would be the end of humanity. So it's kind of an interesting point to make that humans are good at forgetting things, like also forgetting the pain of war. But people aren't going to forget the trees growing overnight, although they apparently have forgotten the moon egg, so who knows?
Well, they forgot the moon egg in the future.
Right, it was right. But in the future, people forget that.
Speaking of the future, Clara points out that she's seen the future. Yes. And she's seen multiple futures, although I don't necessarily recall her seeing multiple futures, but she certainly saw different futures in the main timeline. And the doctor says, yes, and they're all about to be canceled. And I'm going, okay, you established in New Who the concept of a fixed point in time where it always must happen a certain way.
Right.
How are you undoing all of that?
Because some of those fixed points were in the future from this moment. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yet another. Don't look too closely. Don't look under the covers there. Let's look too closely what's going on here. And then in the end, we have they kind of wrap up the Maeve's missing sister story storyline, where
because at the end of the phone call she says, oh, and Annabelle, whatever her last name is, please come home. And then at the end she's hiding behind a bush, which magically vanishes, revealing the sister is back.
Right. Yeah. The feel good moment at the end. Mm-hmm. There is one little Easter egg in this. We see one of the double-decker buses, the famous and there's an ad on the side for it for Doctor Who featuring Peter Capaldi and some other woman, not Clara, not Jenna Coleman, but somebody else, which is kind of funny. But
and it's specifically an ad for, I think it's season 8 of the show, which is the season we're watching.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of funny. They've done these sorts of allusions to the show within the show in the past a few times, but
like funny. At the end of the 7th Doctor episode, the one set in 1963 with the Daleks, and as the final episode is closing, we are watching a TV in a British woman's home, and the announcer says, and coming up next, a new science fiction series, Doctor, and then it cuts.
Yes, that's right. Remembrance of the Daleks, I think, is the one it says here in the TARDIS wiki. So any other notes on this episode, Jimmy?
Good riddance.
That's right. All right. So that's enough of that discussion. Let us go to the feedback I promised earlier.
Cool.
We have some feedback on our 4th Doctor story that we discussed, The Hand of Fear. This came from Robert Hawkins on YouTube, who wrote, originally, Sarah's last story was supposed to end with her sacrificial death, which I think would not have gone over well. The other companions who died were either very brief, pretty much universally hated, or it was undone. So,
like with Clara.
Yes. She was dead and then undeaded. Clara is undead.
Or Bill.
Yep. Yes, or Danny, for that matter.
Well, Danny sort of came back, but then was permanently written out, and he's a zombie Cyberman now. And
yes.
It's just like, ick.
Yes. Moffat just can't kill anyone, but he doesn't, like, nobody dies.
Ruin them.
Yes, he can ruin them, but nobody dies. That's my motto for Moffat. But thank you, Robert, for the feedback. We really appreciate it. We love getting feedback from everyone.
Eldrad must live.
Eldrad must live. And apparently so does Clara. So we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Ryan N., Rebecca Z., Father Andrew W., Mark W., and Father Thomas L. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. This StarQuest show is also brought to you in part by Jacqueline Brown, the best-selling author of The Light series. Check out her new release, Altered, on Amazon or any fine bookstore. Learn more about her and her work at sqpn.com/brown. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode for us. So that's it from us. We would love to hear what you think of this 12th Doctor story, Forest of the Night. Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing a Big Finish audio story featuring Missy and River Song called The Bechdel Test. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest, and remember, I am Dr. Idiot.